Right, I think we might have a few more joining, but I suggest we get started now. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for our Making Connections online consultation webinar. My name's Sarah Prentice from the Greater Cambridge Partnership. I'm your chair for this evening, and I'd like to welcome my colleagues Isabel Wade, who will be presenting shortly, and Alistair McWilliams, who is in charge of all things tech this evening. So the evening will be follow a format of a presentation followed by an opportunity to answer questions. If you do have any questions, please raise your yellow hand or type your question into the chat, please, and then we'll get to you as soon as we can after the presentation. We've all got quite used to, I think, doing meetings online over the last sort of 18 months or so, but just a reminder, please, that we are all at home on our own Wi-Fi, and so do bear with us if anything should cut out or if any cats or dogs or family members should appear. Yeah, without further ado, I shall hand over to Isabel to give the presentation. Isabel.
Cool, thank you everyone. I'll just get the slides up and then we'll make a start. So Sarah or Alistair, could you just confirm that you can see my screen, please? Excellent, thank you. Great, so I'm here today to talk about the Making Connections consultation. This consultation is about broadly three things. So first of all, it's about how we might transform the bus network so that it offers more people a good bus service to get around. It's also about how we can create space on our kind of roads, not just for bus services, but also to improve walking and cycling and enhance our public spaces. And then thirdly, it's about the principles for funding these improvements and creating the road space that we need through a potential charge on vehicles or either driving or parking. So our proposals aim to do quite a wide range of things. So I know that many of you will be aware that the area faces quite a lot of pressures over the coming years. There's a lot of new jobs in Cambridge. With that comes new housing, more people trying to get around. And so what we have seen over the last few years is increasing levels of congestion, and kind of people having quite difficult journeys a lot of the time. We've also got very high levels of carbon emissions in this area from transport, and the city can suffer from poor air quality as well. So what we want to do with these proposals is improve people's journeys, reduce the amount of time that buses take, but also that people driving take to do their journeys, help more people to access work, education, health services, leisure opportunities, green spaces around us, improve the air quality and reduce carbon emissions, as well as kind of make better use of the space that we have to create nicer environments for people walking and cycling, but also kind of spaces that people can enjoy as well. So just taking the first of these areas, which is a transformed bus network. So what we're talking about here is really a step change in the sort of provision that we have at the moment. And I know a lot of places might have, you know, a bus every couple of hours, or even, you know, in some villages once a week or less than that. You know, even some of our larger towns have only got kind of limited services, particularly in the evenings and at weekends. And it can be difficult to get to some of the places around Cambridge, like the hospital or the science park, as a lot of the services go into the city centre at the moment. So what we want to move to is longer operating hours for the network, so kind of 5 AM till midnight, more frequent services, more connections in our rural areas. So we'd have kind of 6 buses every hour from market towns and larger villages, an hourly service from most other villages, and then within the city, services running at a minimum every 10 minutes, but in many cases every 5 or even less than that. We're also looking at how we can improve journey times. So in particular, introducing express services on some routes. We think we can cut kind of 20 to 30 minutes off many journeys into the city. And then we're also looking at fares. So this has come up as a key issue for a lot of people in terms of bus travel. So how can we make fares lower, more affordable to people across the board, but also specific groups of people travelling together or kind of travelling at different times of the day, that sort of thing as well. So this is quite a busy map, which I will talk through in more detail shortly. But as I kind of said, this is really a lot more bus services than we have at the moment. And you can kind of see from this network that it's not just about buses going into the city centre, but also making sure that places around the city and within the city have really good connectivity to the science park, to the hospitals and the biomedical campus, to the West Cambridge site, to the train stations, so that it makes as a much more kind of integrated network and trying to kind of make sure that we reflect where people are trying to get to. So within the city, we haven't drawn a detailed bus network at this point in time, and that's partly because we want to use the opportunity of this consultation to find out what people's most frequent routes are within the city, not just for kind of work purposes, but also for other purposes, you know, for school, caring for people, so we can start to build a picture of what that looks like. But what we kind of are proposing for the city is that we would have this much kind of extended operating hours from 5 a.m. till midnight, many more frequent buses going to a wider range of destinations, including kind of regular services serving residential areas, connecting up to supermarkets and other services, and kind of orbital services around the city as well. And we also want people to be able to access this network easily. So making sure that people are within 5 minutes of a bus stop, or within 7 of one that has faster services as well. And then again, looking at cheaper fares. So for example, you know, should Cambridge have a flat fare like in London where they have a £1.50 flat fare? You know, would that work for our area? Across the network more widely, again, I've kind of covered quite a lot of this, but longer operating hours, higher frequencies, lower fares, and for smaller villages, you know, not every single village will have the population that means that a kind of regular bus service is possible, but making sure people who live in smaller villages still have the opportunity to access the network, whether that's kind of through a connecting service, through something called demand responsive transport, which is being trialled in West Huntingdonshire at the moment, or by accessing a travel hub. So I'm just going to talk through the different bus proposals by area in a little bit more detail. So taking first of all the Haverhill corridor, so we'd be looking at buses every kind of 10 to 15 minutes coming in from Haverhill, Linton, Granta Park. Some of these would kind of serve the existing route, others would use the new Cambridge South East transport route. And again, some of these would be express services, which would take about half an hour off a journey time. And some would kind of run onto the city centre, but others would go directly onto the West Cambridge site, providing a link up there. Also proposing hourly rural services in this area, which would link in with the travel hubs, as well as kind of some of the larger towns as well. So just taking next the Cambourne corridor, again, services every 10 minutes coming in from St Neots and Cambourne, and again links onto the biomedical campus, the science park, the West Cambridge site, the train station, as well as the city centre, and adding kind of new rural routes that would run hourly and link people into that core network, where you could then get a fast service on from there if you wanted to make an onward journey from there, or kind of linking you up with the local area as well. So Waterbeach, Cottenham and Ely corridor, again, kind of frequent services every 10 minutes coming in from Ely, Waterbeach, Cottenham, places like, you know, Histon and Impington as well. And again, lots of connections through, so you can get a direct bus through to the hospital or to the West Cambridge site. And again, making sure that rural areas are kind of well served with an hourly bus service, building on the Ely Zipper service as well. The Fulbourn, Newmarket and Mildenhall corridor, again, kind of regular services in on this corridor every 10 minutes, Some of them would be stopping services, some would be express services, and again, making those links to the science park and the hospital. And just to the south, the Royston and Saffron Walden corridor, again, having services every 10 minutes on these corridors, with hourly connecting services coming into them and kind of joining up local villages, and having connections through to Addenbrooke's and the biomedical campus, as well as the science park. And then finally, the Northstowe and St Ives corridor, where again, making sure that we have at least a 10-minute service on that busway, that we have services that run through to Addenbrooke's and CBC, as well as linking up with the science park, and having rural services that connect up the villages to the northwest of Cambridge, with an hourly service that would run on kind of longer operating hours as well. So a network of this sort, which would be kind of a significant kind of increase in terms of services on kind of the current provision, we estimate would cost around £40 million a year. And I think the experience of places like London shows us that although if you provide a better bus service, more people will take that service and you will get more fare revenue. We know that even in places like London, where there's a very high use of bus services, they still have to subsidise those so that people can rely on the bus, particularly out of hours or in areas where there's kind of lower population densities. And we also know that we want to look at fares and how we can make those cheaper and more affordable. So we estimate it would be around £40 million for improvements. And so we know that we need to raise that money to invest in those additional services, as well as look at improving walking and cycling routes. But to deliver fast and reliable bus services, we're also going to need to cut congestion and free up road space so that those services can run reliably, they don't get stuck in traffic, etc. And so the consultation is asking for feedback on 3 ideas for how we might raise this money and create the space we need to run bus services and improve walking and cycling. And that is on kind of one side of your screen, you've got a pollution charge and a flexible charge. And these are essentially variants of the same thing. It's a charge for driving a car within an area. It would be a daily charge. If it was a pollution charge, that charge might be based on the emissions of the vehicle that was being driven in the area. If it was a flexible charge, it might be based more on the times of day or days of the week, depending on kind of when the roads are busiest. Then on the other side, we have parking charges, and we're looking at kind of a combination of charges here, including the city's parking that is charged already, but also something called a workplace parking levy, which is essentially a yearly fee that is charged to businesses and other organisations for the parking that they have for employees at workplaces. The kind of business in question has a choice about what they do with that fee. They could choose to pay it. They could choose to reduce the amount of car parking that they offer in order to reduce the amount they have to pay, or they could pass it on to employees. So we're asking for feedback on all of these ideas, in particular thinking about things like the hours that it might operate, the area that these might apply to, the cost of it, but also the impacts, particularly on different groups of people. What might a charge mean, and whether people would need help if a charge was introduced. So I just kind of wanted to finish with a couple of wider points. So this project Making Connections, which if you follow kind of the GCP board quite closely, has previously been known as kind of City Access. It's very much part of a wider programme to improve people's travel choices across our area. So our wider programme includes 4 high quality segregated routes for electric buses, walking and cycling coming in from the west, the southeast, the east and the north. It also includes upgrades to some of our key roads in the city, such as Histon and Milton Road, as well as new cycling routes, including a network of greenways, which will come in from the villages into the city as well. And city access very much sits at the heart of this. You know, we know we need that infrastructure in order to provide people with more choice about how they travel, but we also know we need really, really good bus services that use that infrastructure, but also that kind of cover the wider area and cover the city, so that people really do have a choice about how they travel. And we've very much grounded what we've put in this consultation in what we've previously been told. So we ran a consultation in 2019 called Choices for Better Journeys, which looked at kind of what people wanted to see in a public transport network, and asked some kind of very early questions about views on different options for creating space and funding for transport improvements. And what we kind of found from that was that you know, reliability of public transport was really important. So was kind of the speed, the cost, and that kind of people did want us to look at these ideas in more detail. We also ran a citizens' assembly in 2019. This was a group of people who selected via a lottery process, but then chosen to be representative of the demographics of the area, including kind of a range of people from within Cambridge City, South Cambridgeshire, as well as the wider travel to work area. And they came together to look at how we could improve public transport, reduce congestion, and tackle air pollution. And they came up with a vision which very much included kind of fast, reliable, affordable public transport at its heart, as well as creating more space for people to kind of move around our city, walking and cycling, better public spaces. And they put kind of being more environmental at the heart of that vision as well. So we've kind of taken that forward in terms of how we've designed these proposals. So just a quick recap, this is kind of the point we're at. I would say very much that none of the things that are in here are set in stone. It's all kind of quite early days. That's why we're out seeking feedback. There's several ways that you can do this. So we have a survey that is online, and you can also request copies of this if you would like. And our email address is just on the screen there if you want to kind of ask us any questions as well. Just to kind of finish up, so the consultation runs until midday on Monday. And what we will do after that is all that feedback will be analysed. It will be turned into a report, which will be taken to our executive board in June next year, so they can think about kind of what people have said and what the next steps will be for the project. And if we were to go forward at that point with any kind of sort of scheme around improving the bus network or any kind of charge, there would be a second consultation which would set out in detail what we plan to do. So there would be an opportunity to kind of respond to that as well. So thank you, and I'm very happy to take questions either from the chat or kind of spoken. I think Sarah will kind of organise those for me. Thank you.
I will indeed. Thank you very much, Isabel. I can see that we have one hand up, but before we get to you, Tessa, there's been a message in the chat from Mary, who's asking about service level agreements. Will there be a service level agreement with the bus companies?
Yes, thank you. So I guess the short answer is yes, there will be. If we're introducing kind of bus services on this scale, there's several ways that we could do that. But we would look, especially if we're putting funding in, to have an agreement that essentially set out what the expectations were in return for kind of providing that service.
Great, thank you. Tessa, if you'd like to ask your question, Alistair will unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Tessa.
So it wasn't doing much. I clicked unmute. There we go. Yeah, so it sounds all very positive about, obviously faster, more frequent bus services and having more rural connections. And I know you did say that more detail will be given in a second consultation about bus routes before sort of going ahead. But I was just wondering, particularly for Fen Stanton. We were told about all the improvements for the guided busway, but then we were cut off from it and we lost all our services. They went down the guided busway, they didn't stop here, we didn't get a shuttle bus, and it was all very disappointing. Looking at the plans, I was wondering what constitutes a larger village for these extra buses into Cambridge, because obviously there's loads of new housing developments going up in Fen Stanton, a much bigger population than before. And it looks as though we're on a very long-winded circular bus route between villages without any immediate direct route to St Ives, Huntingdon or Cambridge. So I'm trying to gather a picture as to whether this is in addition to what we already have, or if this will end up being the only option and we've got to go around a number of villages in the opposite direction before getting a second bus to somewhere that's where we want to go, which is only 5 minutes down the road, but then may take a much longer winding route, which doesn't sound like it matches with the aims of what you were trying to do.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very good question. So I think what we've kind of tried to do in the consultation survey is ask people a bit about the sorts of services that they want to see. So, you know, do you want kind of more regular services that might take a kind of route round the villages that then plugs into another faster service, or would a kind of more direct service be kind of better? So there's kind of an opportunity in the survey to express a view on that. And I think certainly, you know, the idea is that we kind of capture, you know, villages with, you know, with a population that it's, you know, it's going to be flexible probably depending on the village size. And I'd say very much kind of what we would hope to do is, you know, introduce services, and if there's more demand, put on more services to do that. So I think the comments about Fen Stanton are really helpful in terms of seeing the kind of your thoughts about kind of linking up to St Ives and Cambridge, and kind of, you know, I think that's really useful feedback for us in the consultation as well. So it's not a kind of let's change everything and do it all differently. We're still at the kind of design phase, really.
Yeah, I did do the survey, and it didn't ask me where I am and where I would go to. That it was just, do I agree with all the principles, which I do, but I didn't find any space apart from comments at the end. There wasn't really anywhere to capture where I live and where I go to.
Oh, okay, there should be a postcode question in there, but I think if you want to email comments around that as well, like they will be taken into account in the consultation.
Great. Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Lovely, thank you, Tessa. I can see Philippa has her hand up. You should now be able to unmute, Philippa.
Yes, I've not been on. I'm a little puzzled in that I can't see who else is on the call or anything like that on this particular mode. So following on from what Tessa was saying, and I apologise if it's covered already, but I've just jumped in from another meeting. But this thing about buses, clearly it's not one size fits all, literally, but also not one method fits all. And I know there are experiments about a sort of Uber-type bus where you actually have a demand-led one. And obviously anything that's going to actually encourage people to express a wish to go by bus, if only it goes from the right place to the right place, and that would be good. Because I've never been aware of market research about buses otherwise. I represent Trumpington, where we've had a very sad story as far as buses are concerned, but the whole place was designed at a density to support buses. So we really must make this work. And it could well be that smaller shuttle buses, electric ones, that therefore that, you know, you can charge up and can carry a battery. I take Tressa's point about going all around the villages. So really to know where people want to go, you know, and have, you know, a little more flexible system. We're used to things in the way of apps and things on our phone. I think we need to learn how to be flexible, but that can still hopefully go with reliability. But I am really keen not to see what's been happening in Trumpington happen again, because we've had a almost useless bus service going round and round and round, empty before lockdown. at great expense, polluting the air and not doing anything useful, because the parameters set at the beginning were unhelpful, put it that way, and didn't take account of where people wanted to go. Thank you for your time.
Cool, thank you very much for the comments. So I think, and I 100% agree, it's about making sure that we kind of design the right services for the right place. And I think, you know, making sure we take advantage of the technology that's available to us, whether that is kind of, you know, using a different sort of bus for some routes, you know, thinking about demand responsive services, how people can access them on apps. That's, you know, very much the sort of thing that we'd be looking at with this network. So, you know, hopefully learning from, you know, some of what we've had in the past where services haven't been successful and haven't been well used, how can we introduce something that people, you know, really want to get on and actually kind of, you know, helps people to get around. That's, you know, that's very much the intention. So I think, you know, this survey, plus, you know, we do kind of look at wider data sources as well about kind of where people want to go and things to create that picture. So yeah, very much in our minds.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Philippa, for your question. There have been a couple of comments in the chat asking if we can see people because participants can't see each other. Just to reassure you that yes, we can see who's here and we can see who's got their hands up. So if you have a question, please do raise your hand and we will get to you. There has been a question in the chat from Hugh, and it sort of goes with what Philippa was just saying. So Hugh is talking about fleets of minibuses to help transfer people into the city for the final leg of their journey. And he wants to know if that idea has been rejected or forgotten about because he doesn't see it in the current thinking.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So I think there's kind of definitely a balance to be had here. So I think it hasn't been forgotten about, but I think we do know that people want to access a range of destinations in the city, and making sure that we kind of provide people either with a direct service to get there or with a kind of very easy connection to make if they're kind of going somewhere that is less popular. Making sure that we kind of serve them is definitely part of the plan, and as I said, you know, making sure that kind of the service is suitable for requirements. I think in terms of kind of more widely the points around keeping buses out of the city centre, I think we very much kind of recognise that the current situation can be less than ideal, and if we were to introduce a large number of new services, we wouldn't be kind of looking at all of those going into the city centre. Some of them would be serving places like the hospital, the biomedical campus, the science park, and we'd also be making sure that we do reflect on how buses access the city centre. So I don't kind of have a proposal at this moment in time for exactly how that would work, but it is very much something that we're looking at and would be part of a kind of more detailed consultation next summer.
Thank you. We've had another question in the chat from Tessa. Thank you for your question, Tessa. So she's talking about the guided busway, and with the improvements to the A14, could that mean that some of the guided buses go through the old route from Huntingdon, St Ives to Fenstanton and on into Cambridge?
Thank you. So I think we'll take that as a kind of a suggestion that we could look at as part of the next part of the work.
Okay, we have another question in the chat from Hugh. Thank you very much, Hugh. He's asking about evidence and what evidence we have that workplace parking levies or congestion charging would lead to the necessary reduction in traffic levels that would mean that the buses could operate more effectively.
Well, thank you. So there's a range of evidence that we've drawn on for this. Some of that is taken from other places that have introduced charging or introduced some sort of workplace parking levy or other parking charge. And what they've generally found is that if you do that in combination with improving public transport in terms of kind of frequencies, potentially the cost of it, then you do get lower traffic levels and you do get people switching modes. We have outlined quite a lot of this in the board papers that kind of relate to the consultation. So if you'd like any kind of further details on that, I'm happy to give it to you. The other thing that we do with all of our proposals is that we kind of use the evidence that we have to put them through a model in terms of, you know, what might happen. And we kind of know from the work that's been done looking specifically at Cambridge that we think you could achieve a significant traffic reduction, you know, using these methods, again, in combination with providing that better public transport as well. But you're happy to provide more information if you'd like to follow up.
Great, thank you very much. So I can see no further hands at the moment, and there's nothing more in the chat, but please, there we go. Susan's just put her hand up. Susan, I will allow you to talk. You should now be able to unmute yourself. Please ask your question.
Right, just sort of three things have come up, and some of this may be too detailed, but just things to think about in terms of, I'm trying to think of it from a general public perspective, I suppose. One of the big ones, I suppose, is the area to be covered by any car travel charges. Will it just be the city or be further? Because I know this was of concern in relation to previous consultations, e.g. villages being split in half in terms of charges, etc. And I think that could make a big difference to perhaps how it's viewed. How will residents, in terms of travel charges, how will residents be treated, or how differently will residents be treated compared to visitors coming into the area? Again, this relates to the area covered. And then one particular group in terms of mobility and blue badge users, e.g. those that find public transport very difficult to access. Just in terms of my own sort of work I've done, I'm particularly aware that Cambridge City do seem to be very good in terms of mobility, in terms of not charging people for parking, etc., but there are other authorities in Cambridgeshire that do charge it and don't take any notice. And there seems to be just a lack of awareness that if you've got mobility issues, that you can occur a lot of other expenditure in relation to this. And so I would stress that really does need to be taken into account. I'm not saying it wouldn't be, but I think it's important to flag it up. They're just a few thoughts, particularly in terms of the sort of the potential travel charges. I think you've got a couple of interesting options there, but I think with anything, it'll be the devil in the detail in terms of how people will review it and support it. So perhaps we are a bit early in the stage, because it may be very easy for people to automatically went, more charges on something, more costs. But again, I think you may well just say the detail will be coming up at sort of later stages, but I think that could make a very big difference of how these are viewed. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I completely agree with you. I think the design of this is really important, and I think that's why we haven't put a kind of firm proposal out for this at this point. We try and kind of gather some views through the consultation about the sorts of kind of issues for the design of any charge that people would want us to think about. But just to kind of pick up on your question, so in terms of the charging area, in the consultation, we're asking about two broad options. So one is around kind of a charge that would just cover the city centre. And I think that because that is a smaller area, it is likely that if we were using that to fund bus improvements and to create space on the network, that would need to be a relatively high charge. So kind of, I think in the consultation, we said in the region of £10 to £15 a day. The other kind of option that we've kind of asked about is a kind of area that covered most of the city. It would not cover the park and rides, it would not cover kind of the villages, but most of the city, and that could then be a lower daily charge of a kind of around £5. Again, these numbers are kind of as a guide rather than kind of a firm proposal or idea. Kind of linking then to your second question in terms of residents. So there's kind of different ways that you can set up a charging zone. It can be a zone, so any car moving within that would be charged, or it could be a cordon, so if you cross a line then you get a charge. Again, this is kind of something that we welcome feedback on, but the starting point for us is that it would be a zone, so it would include residents, and the reason for that is kind of twofold. Firstly, because the data we have about traffic movements in the city suggests that 50% of the cars on the road are people who live in the city moving around the city, and the other 50% are people coming in from outside. And the second part is that we want to improve public transport, you know, in the city and in the wider area. And kind of, you know, there's a question about whether it would be fair for people coming in from outside to be paying for improvements that, you know, people who weren't paying for the charge living in the city would also benefit from. So I think, you know, there's no kind of decision around that, but that's the kind of thing that we're kind of wanting to know a bit more about. And then your kind of point around blue badge holders or kind of others who kind of live with kind of mobility issues. I think we very much kind of want to make sure that we're kind of taking the needs of, you know, these people into account. And I think there's a couple of kind of points I would make about that. So I think first of all, for us, it's not just about kind of making sure that those people can continue to drive, but actually, you know, it is really hard to access public transport, particularly for some disabled people. How can we make that better? How can we make that easier for people, so that you don't, if you're disabled, you don't have to have a car, rely on a car. You know, how can we do that? I think the other thing that we will do is an equalities impact assessment, and that will look very specifically at kind of groups of people who may find you know, it more difficult to adapt to a charge, or kind of harder to pay a charge, and it will look at how we can support and help those people as well. So that's very much will be built into kind of the design of anything going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Isabel. And thanks for your question, Susan. We've had a couple of more questions in the chat. The first is from Robert. Thank you very much, Robert. He's talking about Highways England in particular, and some of the investment that they put into the A14 upgrade and the sort of the impact that had on traffic increase sort of versus the GCP's overall aim to reduce traffic. He's asking if any of Highways England budget could be reallocated to the GCP cost in any way.
Cool, thank you. So I think you know, we very much try to link up with Highways England and kind of do meet them regularly. In terms of their budget, I feel like I don't kind of have any decision-making power over that. I think that a lot of their budget is set centrally by the Department for Transport, but certainly, you know, we do make the case to the Department for Transport for funding for kind of full transport improvements. So we'll continue to do that.
Thank you very much. We have another question in the chat from Tessa, who is asking about exemptions. Will there be exemptions for people such as care workers?
So this is a really good question, and I think that kind of at this point in time we haven't got into the detailed design of any charge, but there is a question in consultation about the impact a charge could have on people, and I think that kind of care home workers is and kind of people working in people's homes, caring or kind of doing other work is definitely you know, an example of the sort of kind of person who currently kind of drives in Cambridge, may need their car for certain purposes, that kind of we will be looking at in terms of looking at the impacts on different groups and then thinking about how we can support those people. So, you know, one option may be an exemption, but there may be other things as well. So I think that's kind of part of the detailed design of the next phase.
Lovely, thank you, Isabel. So again, there are no more hands up and nothing else in the chat. If you would like to ask a question, please do let us know. It's a good opportunity to find out something that you might be itching to ask and itching to know. In the meantime, whilst you have a think, I'll just plug tomorrow evening's event. We've got our North GCP Community Forum, which will be talking about making connections, as well as our Cambridge Eastern Access consultation, which is also open at the moment. I see no more hands. Oh, Graham and Robert, you've got in quick there, well done. So Graham is asking about the design of schemes and says, could we try to ensure that cyclists and pedestrians are separated and don't have joint use footpaths? Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, thank you. So, certainly yes. So I think the GCP has said that we want to design kind of infrastructure for people cycling and walking in line with the government's latest guidance on this, which does suggest segregation as much as possible. So that's certainly an ambition. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your question there. And Robert says, are there any other cities that we could look at as a model that we would hold up as a system we would like to get to?
Goodness, that's a great question. So I think we would probably pick elements from different cities, to be honest. I think partly because Cambridge is its own place with its own issues that we need to address. But I know that quite a few cities in Belgium and the Netherlands have looked at how they can really enhance their public transport networks, how they can enhance their walking and cycling networks so that more space is available for buses for people walking and cycling, making those journeys kind of more reliable, safer. There are several cities that have kind of used types of charging, including Stockholm, as well as many of you will be aware of London, but Birmingham are also looking at charging at the moment, and have just introduced a kind of clean air zone charge that we're kind of looking closely at in terms of the impact that's having on air quality, on kind of congestion, as well as on public transport, and the sorts of kind of improvements that they're able to make as a result of that. So I think it's a range of places, but certainly kind of it's a high ambition.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your question. Philippa, I can see you have your hand up. You should now be able to unmute to ask your question.
Yes. Yes, I forgive me, I've bounced into this particularly keen to look after my own neighbourhood, but I'm not well informed on the wider picture. But car clubs, where you can join and borrow cars and vans and so on, these really need to be a large scale to be attractive. People really need to have the confidence if they're not going to have a car, or they're not going to have a second car. And that's something in Trumpington, people are being forced to, to live without a second car. They need to know that they can get it when they need it. And it's that volume stuff that I feel is lacking at the moment, and wonder if the GCP has a role to play. I don't know whether you have a favoured partner or somebody, want somebody who can be wheeled in to provide, if a dozen or more cars are lined up, for example, on the park and ride, which is the obvious place for Trumpington, with electric charging points attached. If people see that, then they're far more likely to take that big step of doing without a car. And we are about to hit the buffers as far as parking controls in Trumpington is concerned, because we're new build, and a lot of people have moved in without realising there were going to be restrictions. So we really need to give people alternatives. So the concept of having electric charging points with electric cars attached, and also secure parking for cycles, if that's how you get to the car, is all going to encourage people who are otherwise getting the door-to-door convenience of the private car. Have you got any ways of doing this you do at the moment, or searching?
Yeah, thanks. So I think I think very much that car clubs will be part of the answer, because I think, whilst in a night, we would like to to offer people a bus service that gives people as many options for their journeys as possible. Ultimately, everyone sometimes, will need to travel with a lot of stuff, or kind of take a route, an inconvenient route on a convenient time. So, how we can expand car clubs is very important. I think that there are two that currently operate in the city, Enterprise and Zipcar, although I'm apologise if there are others that I'm unaware of. And certainly kind of increasing that provision, to a large extent, will support people. So I think, you know, that is something that we can look at as part of kind of the wider package around this. You know, do we have a kind of car club scheme that sits alongside the bus network improvements, and, you know, make sure that
it's not just the can, but I think it must be. I mean, I don't see how we can give people a fair alternative without car clubs, and they have to be there sitting ready and waiting. We have one space in Trumpington. That's not going to get people out of their cars, I really feel. And I need to be able to say, yes, it's coming, not, oh, yes, they're considering it. You know what I mean? It's a really difficult position to be in a place like Trumpington. I know we're not the only ones, but we can't point to a row of cars and vans that people can use at the moment. And we need to rush that in. How does this happen then? Do we put in some sort of application for funding, or how does this work with the GCP?
So I think obviously we can take that comment as a response to the consultation. If you want to kind of raise the issue more broadly, then kind of, you know, email or contact us email address, and we'll kind of pick that up and come back to you.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. So we have a question from Hugh in the chat. It's a twofold question, which I'll put together, Hugh. So he's talking about the Drummer Street and the lack of capacity for extra buses to terminate in the city centre. He's asking if that means more cross-city services, and he's also asking if there are any plans for an interchange facility between local buses and express coaches.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think in terms of cross-city services, so potentially yes, there would be more. And I think the other type of service we would probably see more of is kind of orbital services that don't necessarily go through the city centre, but kind of link up kind of parts of Cambridge and the wider area to some of the kind of key places people want to get to. In terms of the question about interchange between local buses and express coaches, so I think you know, that's an issue that has been raised. Certainly improving that would be good. I think that part of in terms of kind of interchanging things, I think I mentioned, you know, we do kind of appreciate the need to look at the kind of the city centre, you know, how bus services serve that, and the link up with the coaches. So I don't have a kind of proposal on that at this point, but very much kind of looking to kind of if we do have a more detailed consultation next summer, that will look at some of the issues like this. So thank you for raising it here.
Okay, thank you for all your questions so far. Is there anybody else who would like to ask anything about the Making Connections consultation, or any points that you'd like to raise? No, I can see no more yellow hands waving at me at the moment. There might be somebody typing in the chat, so I will just give people a couple more seconds in case there is anything else. Okay, I can see nobody waving enthusiastically at me. So I think what we'll do is we will end the session there. The consultation is open until midday on Monday, the 20th of December. So there is still time to get in your response if you haven't already done so. If you already have, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming along this evening. I appreciate you giving up your time to come and find out a bit more. Thank you very much, Isabel, for presenting, and thank you to Alistair for being our tech support. And I'll wish you all a very pleasant evening, and if it's not too early, best wishes for the festive season.